Welcome to Insights from the Couch, where real conversations meet real life at midlife.
We're Colette and Laura, two therapists and best friends, walking through the journey right alongside you. Whether you're feeling stuck, restless, or just unsure of what's next, this is a space for honest conversations, messy truths, and meaningful change.
And our Midlife Masterclass is now open. If you're looking to level up, get into action, and make midlife the best season yet, go to insightsfromthecouch.org and join our waitlist. Now let's dive in. I'm so excited for our guest today. Katherine Woodward Thomas is an award-winning psychotherapist and pioneer in transformational psychology and the New York Times bestselling author of Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After, the national bestseller Calling in the One, 7 Weeks to Attract the Love of Your Life, and her latest book that's just come out, What's True About You, 7 Steps to Move Beyond Your Painful Past and Manifest Your Brightest Future. The book is fantastic. We're so excited to have you here and dive into this topic. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so this is so important for, even as therapists, Laura and I were talking about how this is really like a missing piece in the puzzle, that people go to therapy to heal. And of course, that's important too, especially with traumatic histories. And we've all got something painful in the past, but we can really get stuck there. And what's often missing is the skills and a way to really focus on the future we want to create. So this is a lot of what you're going to talk to us about today. And we're both really excited to learn. What got you onto the idea of this type of process?
Well, I was a person who had a very traumatic, I want to say childhood, but it was a lot of trauma up to the age of about 21. And I ended up, fortunately going into therapy myself, and I did 12-step programs because I had a food addiction and just all sorts of healing workshops and anything I could do because I was really unwell. So I spent a lot of years going to various therapists, and I got really good at connecting the dots and understanding why I was the way that I was and having things validated that had never been really articulated before. It was a very healing experience. So at the end of about 20 years of that, I definitely feel that therapy saved my life. Looking backwards, saved my life in many ways, but it didn't necessarily change the patterns. So I still had really toxic relationships with men. Even with my friends and social circle, I would be kind of subservient and placate to people because I felt inferior to them. And I just felt that I wasn't earning the kind of money I wanted. I didn't have the career I wanted. So life wasn't really working. So it wasn't until really I was actually in my 40s, my early 40s, that I discovered kind of these metaphysical transformational technologies of claiming a positive, possible future, just setting an intention for something that's actually outside of your identity to have. Something you've never had before, but always wanted, always struggled with, always felt like almost like a phantom life. Like there's this life over here. I'm supposed to be living this life and having, this chasm that you don't know how to cross. And of course, for years, most of us are trying to cross that chasm by going back and looking at our past and doing more work and understanding what happened when, who, with who, where, why, all of that stuff, and forgiving our parents, forgiving our siblings, doing all of that work. But what I discovered is that it's really the self of the future. That when you anchor into a positive, possible self of your future, that future self begins informing how you show up today, begins informing the development that you need to engage. One of the reasons we repeat patterns is not because we're trying to endlessly heal that pattern. From my experience, repeating a painful pattern from childhood was never a healing experience. It was a rewounding experience.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered is that it's actually missing development. That when we got frozen in trauma, we didn't learn how to do certain things. And I know you know this because your book is coming out that's, all about teaching people how to speak up. Right. So if you got frozen in an I'm invisible, for example, then your voice was silenced and you did not know how to speak up. You can't actually have a good relationship unless you know how to speak up.
Right.
So we're going to keep repeating the patterns because we haven't identified the actual missing development. So one of the things that I really emphasize is we're not talking about a future that's a goal. Because a goal is kind of predictable given who you are and what your circumstances are right now, the best possible outcome. We're actually talking about something that is foreign to you, that you would have to outgrow who you've known yourself to be in order to manifest that future and sustain that future. So that's the context of the work, because it initiates what Wayne Dyer called a future pull. And I'll tell you that it's interesting to me because there was an academic article written by a woman, Hazel Marcus, who's at Stanford now, and Paula Nereus back in 1986 called Positive Possible Selves. And what that article showed was that the future that we're living into determines who we are today as much or more than the past.
Oh,
You're
thank God.
your
Thank
language.
God. Yes.
Yes.
All the way back in 1986, this was written.
Yes. And you know what? Academics back then, they were not part of mainstream.
Right.
Like in 86, what was really hot was Melanie Beattie's Codependent No More. Right, that was just coming out. But, Melanie wasn't an academic. I mean, she didn't even go to college, actually.
Right.
Right.
I read that book. Yeah.
I have that book.
This was her personal experience, and she shared it. She articulated it beautifully. Back then, they were just kind of doing their own thing, and then they went on to other things.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite articles, though, and a lot of what I do is based on that. And then the 7-step process that I created, people are kind of hip too. Well, you have to change your identity. James Clear, who's beautiful. He's got this gorgeous book about, making these small changes to really change your life. And he actually says in the book, you can't make any changes unless you have an identity shift. But if you've had a lot of trauma in your life, you don't so easily make an identity shift, particularly if you've been talking about it for 5-10 years, because in many ways, what we focus on grows. And so here we are talking about old trauma, and in the meantime, we're solidifying the self of that trauma.
Right. Right. So we're sort of deeply ingraining the same narrative over and over, which can be a real stuck point in therapy. I relate so much to what you're saying because I felt for years before I became a psychotherapist that I had all the insight in the world. I'd done some good therapy. I had toxic relationship patterns. I had eating issues. I have had what I called then a very addictive personality. I probably still have that. But I would understand why and understand the wounds. And I was never changing the patterns. And I'd go to therapy and talk about it and feel enlightened and maybe even feel some relief from like, oh, this is why. And like you said, the validation from the therapist, but then nothing in my life would change. So I think this is really important, even if, not all therapists want to look at it, I'm sure, from this angle. How do we begin to do this? I mean, obviously, everyone needs to get and read your book because you're going to walk them through this process. You say it's hard to shift your identity if it's rooted in trauma. How do we begin to do that?
Yes, of course. So step 2 of the process, now that we have the context of kind of an outrageous, unreasonable future, I'm going to triple my income within the next year. I'm going to get married to an amazing partner within.
Wait, can it be something like that? Can it be like?
Absolutely. I love measurable results because measurable results like that really hold us accountable for being who we need to be and taking the risk to get out of our comfort zone and to try on new ways of being. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, my first reaction was so excited. My second reaction, I had my own little thought about my own life, was immediately to tell myself, no, that's aiming too high. So is it like, isn't that interesting?
The belief right there, yeah.
I'm already limiting myself, right?
Yes.
In the moment, first was, yay, how exciting, I can be whatever I want to be. And then immediately I edited myself with, no, that would be aiming too high. So that obviously is some of my own work to do. But is it pie as the sky? Do you encourage people to really envision whatever they want, even if it feels unrealistic or totally out of reach?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think I'm going to call that a lack of sponsorship when you were young that you internalized.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm writing that down.
Wait, and what do
Right.
you mean by that, a lack of sponsorship when I was young?
That the adults in your space would say, okay, Missy, you've had enough.
Yeah.
Sit down, be quiet, go do your homework or whatever. I mean, that they weren't pleased with your bigness and your boldness and your creativity. This happens for women a lot.
Yeah.
And
I had this. I remember in the 6th grade, I was so into like saving the environment. And I was so determined to go to Alaska to clean up the oil spill and like raise money for it. And like my best friend and I wanted to go. And I was so serious about it. I was reading Silent Spring, which was like,
I read that too.
I don't even think I was like reading it in the 6th grade. I was looking at it. Anyway, long story short, I came to the adults in my life and my mother just like laughed at me. She thought the whole thing was hilarious. She thought it was pathetic. And I just remember what a missed opportunity that was as a parent.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was so full of inspiration and I was just like, crushed.
Well, and so it's almost like in a fairy tale, you either get blessed or you get cursed. I think of those things as curses.
Yeah.
And then it gets internalized. And then we say to ourselves, who are you to do that? Or that's silly.
Yeah.
You just, get more realistic or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the thought. So I imagine if we have those experiences and it can come from your family of origin or even society, I feel like my parents were pretty encouraging of me, but the messages I got at school were definitely, I was praised academically, but my personality, it was like, calm down, you're too rebellious, you're too outrageous, you're too outspoken. And so we internalize these things, and everybody's probably got a couple of different narratives that we're limiting, that we're trying to get beyond. So in step 2, that's where we set a measurable intention.
Well, that's step 1 is we set that intention. Okay. Step 2 is to then look at the pattern in this particular area.
Okay.
And why you've been so resigned. Probably because you have a lot of evidence to the contrary, truthfully.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So in step 2, we identify what I call your source fracture story in that area. And the source fracture story, I actually have 22 that I've identified as the most common ones. I'm alone. I'm not safe. I'm not wanted. I'm too much. I'm not good enough. So there's about 22 of them. And there's usually one primary one that's operating in that particular area that you've been overly identified with. And I call that the traumatized self. Now, because it has an emotional center and it gets triggered so often when we are threatened or particularly disappointed, or even if we're anticipating a disappointment or a threat, that we will very often, we're just so overly identified with it. I mean, I think Dick Schwartz uses the word blended with that self. We're blended with that self. That is the self in
Right.
this
Feels true.
area.
It feels completely true.
Feels true. Feels true. So we're looking at it like it's true. And I distinguish it as trauma and not truth. And the only way to be able to really overcome it is to get related to it from the part of you that's holding access to wisdom and resources, maturity, love. And it's as simple as even finding the part of you that might show up for a good friend when they're really discouraged, and put your arm around that person and say, sweetie, you've got this. You're okay. You know, this will pass. So it's that inner fairy godparent that we begin to connect with great compassion. But we need to get the wise self in charge and begin to speak words of comfort. Now, one of the things that makes that complicated is that the relationship to ourselves has been duplicating that wound. Where we've been, so if you have an I'm not good enough, maybe we've been forcing ourselves to do more, be more, perform more, to prove yourself. Or we've been very critical of ourselves, that we're not as good as other people. We compare ourselves to other people. So there's a re-wounding that's happening in the relationship to the self. If you have an I'm alone, you neglect yourself. So the dialogue then becomes, please forgive me. I'm really sorry for treating you this way. And I see that is not accurate, that was never true about you. And really learn how to connect with our own source fracture story self, which is a younger self. One of the key questions there is, how old are you, sweetheart? When that self comes up, you say, how old are you, sweetheart?
Right.
So this is like ego state, internal family systems work. So you're saying like the real relationship is that self to part or self to trauma story, that like you're getting into that wise self energy.
Yeah, I've never studied Dick's work. I do like Janina Fisher a great deal because she's very aligned with what I'm saying. So it's more of a direct dialogue.
Okay.
Dick's work has always been a little bit, firefighters. And I kind of don't relate to all of the terms and stuff. But it is this very direct relationship to that younger self, who, by the way, was kind of alone in that story, because whenever we created these stories, there wasn't a fairy god person there to correct us and say, sweetheart, it's not that you're not good enough. It's that your mother's in a depression.
Right. We're being that wise, loving self to ourselves, that adult that we didn't have at the time, to give us compassion and nurturance and comfort and reassurance. And it's such a source of power. So this is what makes our transformation possible, right? That we realize we have this adult self that is capable, that can see ourselves and the world and possibility differently. And we don't just continue to operate and re-narrate the same story out of that tunnel vision that is often a very young, wounded story.
And very fixed self, because when we were young and we created these stories, we didn't have the capacity to hold complexity in our minds.
Right.
So it was just very black and white. I'm not good enough, or I'm inferior, or I'm alone. And if you notice, whenever you drop down into that center, that's the story. And no matter how much you understand where it comes from, it doesn't actually change.
Yeah.
Right? So what changes it then is going into step 3. Now you have this foundation of being able to mentor yourself. And in step 3, you actually wake yourself up to what is really true about you. What is true about you? I am more than worthy of love, just as I am. I didn't come here to be alone. I have the ability to learn new skills that will allow my relationships to flourish and thrive and deepen. I am the source of my own safety. I am the source of safety for myself and others. So from your adult cognitive self, you can actually begin to mentor yourself to what is really true. And so the value of that is that when we fall into the ditch again of becoming, a disappointment happens, we automatically drop down into, see, I'm not good enough, or see, I can't have what I want. And you have your, what we call power statements right there. You go, no, sweetheart, that's not what's happening here. All that's happening is X, Y, Z. But what's really true about you is boom. And you can stay generative of the future that you desire. Because when we go into a false center, we go into resignation and we stop generating the future.
Oh my gosh, that's it. That I've been living some of that in this book. This book process as a first-time author, bumping up against my old narratives. And I think as I listen to you, and it's not only that brings it up, like you said, we always go back to kind of maybe there's one predominant story, because I am a certified EMDR therapist, and these are in EMDR work, these core negative cognitions that sometimes when people have a lot of complex trauma, they might identify with multiple narratives. I'm not good enough. I'm not safe. I'm alone. There's something wrong with me, right? Being defective. But there's usually one that's predominant. And I think mine is I'm not safe. And so as you said, all roads go back to that for me. It seems like that's my core story that comes up again and again. So even as you said the words, I am the source of safety for myself, that feels like something I want to believe, but at times feels hard to believe. So do you find it's difficult for people to start to step into these new narratives, or just really reconnecting with the self again and again and again in the moment?
That's a great question. So the next step is about seeing yourself as the source. And I think this is the one that's going to be very interesting to therapists, because I remember when I was in private practice, my focus was on empathetic attunement, safety, creating safety and trust.
Yeah.
So if people were very victimized by something that happened to them, guess what? They were pretty victimized by that. All right. So I'm not non-victimization because people aren't
right.
victimized. Okay.
Right.
So, but you can stay there and for years,
right?
And nothing really changes, because nothing actually changes inside of a victimized conversation. Right. So while we're not responsible for what happened to us in childhood, we are responsible for the choices we're making and the actions we're taking now as adults that are covertly weaving into the field evidence for that story.
Yes.
So, for example, if I have an I'm not good enough, I'm inferior, I'm going to show up as subservient. I'm going to kind of overdo, overfunction, train other people to underfunction, to expect more from me, to feel entitled for more from me. And then I get exhausted and I get burnt out and I get resentful, all of these things, right? But I actually trained them to do that. So now I'm getting relational mirroring for the you're not good enough, Katherine, because I overcommit myself. I say I'm going to do too much. I don't deliver on all of it. And now they're irritated with me, right? So this is the thing that I think Dan Siegel is really trying to articulate, is that beliefs are not about the self. Beliefs are relational. We are not solo creatures. They are relational. And so they were formed in relationship with someone. Something was happening that gave you that impression. And they must be transformed in relationship. So you have to start to see how you are the source of creating. It's freeing. It's freeing. I mean, look, truthfully, if you have you have a lot of defenses, and you haven't sufficiently worked on yourself, you're kind of newer at working on yourself, then it might be difficult. Okay, so people are in different places from their psychological sophistication. But most people, particularly those who've been working on themselves, are relieved to finally, now what happens when we ask, how are you the source, is number one, we're so also psychologically sophisticated now, we go into the explanation, well, my mother, well, my father. This is why This is how I'm the source. I don't believe in myself because my brother used to put me down all the time. But that's victimized. And now I'm victimized even by my own consciousness because of the imprinting that I have, right? So nothing's going to change there. What I have to look at it through the lens of volitionality. What are the choices I'm making? So instead of saying, well, I can't speak up for myself because my father used to rage at us when we taught, we said anything for ourselves, you might say, well, I won't speak up for myself now because I'm unwilling to risk someone being angry with me the way my father was. Because the moment you name it like that, now you have a choice about that.
Right. And it's your choice.
And it's truer. It's a truer assessment of what's going on.
Right.
Like you're naming what's really happening as opposed to just like.
The second part of the book, I actually break down, I call it the breakthrough blueprint, the true you breakthrough blueprint, because I break down how we are showing up in very particular ways that are generating evidence for that particular story. And it's really fascinating. So, for example, in the I'm Alone story, you're self-sufficient to the extreme, which means other people can't find their way into your world. They can't feel your vulnerability. Don't take the risk to be vulnerable because you fear that people are going to leave you, because there's always a relational component to the I'm alone. Others always leave or nobody's there for me to begin with. So inside of that consciousness, you're conflict avoidant, which means, and Colette knows this because I was a TED Talk, that your relationship doesn't bond deeply. You're not with each other emotionally. Also, another one for the I'm alone that's very common is if somebody hurts your feelings, you might, pretend and keep smiling at them and be nice, but you have cut them off in your heart. No second chances.
Oh, I do that.
Right? Which generates aloneness.
Yeah. Not as much as I used to, but that's one I can still go back to if something really hurts. And I think it is this hyper independence, particularly in women. It builds a wall that we don't always see.
Yeah. So once you see it, you go, oh, all right, well, I'd like to graduate from this I'm alone. I'd like to go into, I'm a part of all that is. I'm connected to all of life. And then you start to see, okay, well, I'm going to have to make some changes. And so that's step 5. What are the new ways of relating, which are basically the opposite. So when somebody hurts your heart, they hurt your feelings. You pick up the phone and you say, can we talk this through? I feel really awkward and uncomfortable because I'm not used to doing this. And I'm not even sure.
What to say. Or,
like you just be your awkward self and you just go. And what happens is that immediately you discover that most people are very open to that. And it actually deepens the connection.
Exactly.
There's a lot of opposite action. This is where the behaviorist in me kind of sings because I see too a lot of people who are stuck in patterns that they can't get out of or stuck in their traumas, and activating and transforming people. There's always an element of opposite action and behavioral exposure where you have to do the thing that feels like death, right? To traumatize self. To make 3 times as much money, you have to put yourself out there in ways that maybe the way you protect yourself does not want to do that.
Right. That's right. See, immediately it activates the source fracture story. If you've really done it well, you activate your source fracture story, you name it, you see where it is in your body, you start to mentor it, you come into a deeper truth, you recognize how you've been generating that story. That's why you have so much evidence. It actually creates possibility when people can see how they've been doing this. And then you identify the new ways of being. And then we go into step 6, which is embrace a growth mindset. Because guess what? We don't know how to do these things yet.
Right.
I don't know how to set boundaries. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't
Right.
know how to express those feelings to another person.
I love that.
And then step 7 is where the rubber meets the road. It's the choice points. What are the choices you're going to make to show up differently, to get out of your comfort zone, to create something new, to be wildly uncomfortable? And that's where things really rapidly change. So it's interesting because with this technology, things actually change for people very quickly.
Wow. And
That-
then, Catherine, as people read the book, they're going to be able to walk through this journey, right? You're going to be able to unlock change because you're giving us this whole process without having to necessarily go through therapy. Like, if you're really willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work, this is possible.
Absolutely.
And you know what I
Absolutely.
love about this is it's like this nice, clean through path somewhere between like manifestation, which like I think people are very confused about, and it feels it's not really doing the work. It's like I want a Mercedes or something like that. And then all of this deep sort of work that you need other like professional therapists to mine out. In the middle here is like this connection to self, imagination for a bigger possible future, and then like this loop of experimentation and continual conversation with self to get to that future. It feels very realistic and like the work so many people kind of avoid.
Well, that's what finally changed my life.
Really? This is
Absolutely.
the journey
Yeah,
you did.
Yeah.
I think, I think, a lot of times people who create work do it because they're looking for something themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Melanie, right? Or
Yeah.
even John
Yeah.
Bowlby, right? He had all these wounds in his relationship with his mother. And so now I feel quite free, actually,
Yeah.
from what happened to me in the past. And it was interesting too, because for decades, my relationship with my parents was very strained. Really because of all the trauma that I suffered. And, even though you do your work on it, it still, we didn't really have the breakthrough. Now we're really, really close. We're completely bonded. I didn't really bond with my mom until I was in my 60s.
Wow.
Wow.
Now we're very, very close and loving. And if you saw us together, you'd never know we were estranged for years. So it can really change everything. It's just kind of rearranged the playing field of my life. I'm in a beautiful relationship, that's healthy and kind and, supportive and, really helps me to become who I am in the world as opposed to hold me back, which I think that our relationships were in the past,
And I love how you're holding out tremendous hope that we can feel free. I mean, I think that is at the core of it, being able to believe in yourself, what's true about you, right? Your value, your worthiness, your capability, your capacity for connection, and feeling free in our lives and in our bodies. I mean, I think that is the greatest gift we can have as human beings. And I know for me, I really want to work this roadmap that you're laying out because I think Laura and I were chatting last night we had a little happy hour cocktail catch-up session. And I thought I'd done all this work, and just even the process of writing a book and stepping onto a more public stage has made me bump up against new stuck places or parts of myself that still need work, self-limiting beliefs that I didn't even know I was carrying as I'm trying to grow into a new chapter. So I think there's different levels of growth that we work throughout the lifespan. And you're giving people a way to do this wherever you are, whatever the trauma, whatever the stuck point, and really whatever you want, because that's what it's about. We've all been wounded, but knowing what you really want for your own life and not feeling like you can't have it because of something from the past.
Yeah, I mean, the work really takes you out of reactivity, kind of endless reactivity, and puts you into a place of being generative.
Yes. That's what we want. People want to believe they have the power to create something and the power to change something, those dynamics in their lives.
Yeah, and to graduate from those old hurts.
Yes.
They don't
And
have
we do. We do.
Yeah.
So you are going to change even more lives than you already have. Before we let you go, and I know you have a hard stop, but I just want to ask you, I'm so curious because you've done so much profound work. You're such a pioneer in the field. You've written so many great books. But I'm just curious too, what it was like for you to have coined a term that is world famous, that everyone knows, like conscious uncoupling. There is not a person that doesn't know that, say that.
My conscious uncoupling book.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, it was one of the greatest moments of my life when Gwyneth popped it into the lexicon, and the next day it was online in the dictionary online as redefining divorce in the 21st century, and I just sat there crying.
Oh, I have goosebumps.
Because my own parents' divorce was so horrid and lasted for so many years. The animosity and the resentment and anger. It really defined not just my younger years, but it defined my relationships for the first 2 decades of my adulthood. So to be able to then transform that pain into a contribution was really beautiful.
Oh, I use it all the time in work, but now every time I use it, I say Katherine Woodward Thomas's phrase, right? Like I make sure to give you credit because it is so, and I had a story like yours, really a lot of wounding from my parents' difficult divorce and a desire to do it differently than I then promptly didn't do. I ended up replicating those same patterns in many ways. So I think that process is so transformative for people. And I see it now as a couples therapist that we are approaching divorce differently. And so many people are consciously uncoupling, which back in the 80s just really didn't happen. So you've changed the world. And I want all of our listeners, you guys get this book. Go through this process. This is it. We're giving you a way to not need to pay us as therapists. Yes. So go by what's true about you. And Katherine, any parting thoughts about where people can find you, the book, anything you want to leave?
KatherineWoodwardThomas.com. And we do have, bonuses, which I know you have for your book. And, we love to give things away when people pre-order and order.
And Colette and I are ready for the training. When are you training therapy?
Oh, thank you. Future Forward Therapy. We're actually starting in April.
Laura, let's do it.
Yes.
Okay.
I've been looking for a process that's really very clean and helps people.
Well, the first level one is doing your own work.
I'm here for that.
Yes, you're in the Through Your Awakening course.
Yeah,
and then there's also professional meetings after each week.
Oh my God, let's do it!
A lot of synchronicity here.
I'm so excited. And of course, I'm so grateful that you endorsed my little first-time author book. So thank you so much for that.
You're so welcome. I'm really excited about your book, too.
Thank you. Well, your book is fantastic. Everybody go get What's True About You. It's going to change your life. And be in touch with Katherine at her website. We'll have everything in the show notes. And we hope, as always, you got some insights from our couch today. We'll see you all next week.
Bye, guys.